Welcome to Your Wealth, here with Real Talk San Diego and now Real Talk Solana Beach. Also my co-host,
Karen Casino.
And myself, Ryan White. With us today, we have Dr. Lori Love. She is a child custody consultant with Love Alvarez Psychology. Also, Allison Patton. She's a family law mediator and attorney with Patton Thixton. As well as waiting eagerly off stage, we have Dave Schulman. He's a family law attorney with Moore, Schulman, and Moore. Ahead of us today is the kids, all about the kids. Putting the kids first, which frankly I would imagine should always do. I would imagine that's pretty prominent in just about all of your practices. But I think we're going to first by exploring it from the approach of what not to do, right? You've been through this process a couple times. Tell us what you've seen in example and practice about, well, what you shouldn't do.
I have a few good stories about that. I've been in the field for 22 years, so I've seen good people at the worst time in their lives, and I've seen not so good people at the worst time in their lives. One of the things that I see most frequently is that people are excited to be divorced. One person might feel betrayed, surprised. I hear the word blindsided frequently. The one who's ready to move on has a new partner, is excited about that, and they want to introduce that partner to their children. That's where we get into trouble, because children, we need to go with their timetable, not the one that works for us. And if you haven't been dating somebody for 6 months or a year, you really should not introduce your new partner to your children. You don't want a revolving door. You want them to meet somebody that's special, not somebody that you're just dating casually. So I often tell people 6 months to a year. If you can wait a year, that's really putting your child first.
This is before the kids meet the new mom or dad.
Correct, or girlfriend, boyfriend.
Got
it's
it.
just a good idea to wait.
Yeah.
But how many of them really listen to that?
Well, that depends. I mean, usually the people that are in my office are the people who are trying to do things right. They want to learn. They want to know, what can I do for my child that's really going to help them. So the ones I come across usually adhere to that. One of the other things, I have a horror story of a 7-year-old little girl that I was seeing as a psychologist, and she was telling me about the transitions between her parents. And Dad bought all of the clothes from Nordstrom's. Mom bought all of her clothes from Target. She looked adorable every time I saw her, so I really couldn't tell the difference. But they would meet in a parking lot to transition her, strip her down to her underwear, and then transfer her to the other parent. That way, and I mean, you don't need to be a psychologist to realize that's pretty traumatic and not a good idea. These were loving parents. They really didn't think what they were doing was wrong. And once we pointed it out, they did a lot better. But that's the kind of stuff that goes on. You know, I bought those clothes, they should stay at my house. They're the child's clothes. So if you put them first, yes, it means you lose a Nordstrom's outfit, but it's worth it. It's worth it for their integrity and them to feel good and loved.
I would imagine so.
Yeah. I think another interesting thing that people do is they refer to their former spouse as something negative on their phones. And I remember I was sitting with a man in therapy, and the phone was sitting out, because most of us have our phones sitting out all the time, and it said, Wicked Witch of the East. And I looked and I smiled and I said, that wouldn't be your former partner, would it? And he laughed and said, yes, my buddies and I did that. We thought it was funny. And I said, how often is your phone around your children? And he said, pretty often. And I said, how do you think that feels? And a look came over his face and he said, awful. And right there on the spot, he changed it to her first name. And I thought that was a really good thing. But it wasn't that he was a bad person trying to hurt his children.
Right.
He just wasn't in touch with how much that could hurt with a child seeing something like that.
We're talking to Dr. Lori Love. She is a child custody consultant. Her website is lovealvarez.com. That's the website. LOVEALVAREZ, lovealvarez.com. And you talked briefly about passing messages back and forth with the kids. Is that a good idea?
That is not a good idea. Even passing checks, people will say it's a positive. I'm sending her the support check. And that really stresses children out. They don't want to be a part of that. Paperwork. I've had people try to serve their former partner through their children, which I don't even believe the attorneys can tell us. I don't even believe that's valid service, but you can imagine how upsetting that would be for a child. So, yeah.
What about, too, Lori, having the kids or having the parents discuss the divorce in front of the kids? I see that. I'm a forensic accountant that works with people going through divorces, and I see that. In fact, one of them will call me on the phone and they'll be talking with me about what's going on in their divorce, and I can hear the kids in the background. And I always say, you want to call me back? Because, they shouldn't be hearing that. I mean, what kind of impact does that have if they're just openly talking about the divorce?
Well, I think that's wonderful that you do that. I wish all of the professionals involved, if they heard something like that, would intervene and mention that that's not a good thing to do. Again, most people don't do it intentionally. Most people have not been through this before. So a simple pointing out that even though your kids appear to be preoccupied and not listening, they're going to absorb some of it. And especially if it's negative, especially if it's financial, legal, they know something's going on. So it's a really bad idea.
Okay, we talked about some of the things we shouldn't do. What about some of the positive actions we can do to make this transition as smooth as possible?
One of my favorite things that I try to get parents to do is to say something nice about the other parent. And if they can't say something nice, something neutral. Children of divorce do not get the opportunity to hear the happy stories of, when their mom was pregnant with them, the wonderful things that happened. To say something like, there's the little cafe your dad used to take me to get breakfast when I was pregnant with you. We ate salmon because we thought you'd be smarter. It must have worked. Something like that makes children feel secure in their world and that they were created in love. That might be too much to ask with some of the people that we work with. So even something as benign as, your dad used to drive a car like that when we were dating. It's a red VW bus. It was so much fun to ride around in it. Not saying anything positive about him, but just a memory that the child can cherish. So I really encourage parents to give their children something like that. One of the other tools would be Our Family Wizard. I think it's a brilliant online communication source for parents. They have a calendar, an expense report. You can communicate with each other with a tone meter. So you don't need to pay a consultant, right, to check your emails. It will say that tone is not appropriate. You want to bring it down to a business-like,
Wait, I want to hear about this.
Yes.
How does it do that? You're not talking into it, right? You're typing.
You are typing, and there's not a little person standing there and checking it, but they look at things like capitals. They look at exclamation marks. They look at saying you. There are different algorithms within the program that point out you might want to change your tone. I love that. And it really does help people communicate. Also, when we're on Facebook, when we're on email, we're texting, there are many different places that parents are communicating. If you segregate it all to Our Family Wizard, everything's in the same place. So when you need to refer to it, you can. And let's say you do need a professional to assist you in responding to certain emails. A professional can log on and check it for you. I just think it's a brilliant program, and I really support it for parents.
I love that program too, for all the same reasons. And it creates a paper trail also of all the communications, if they are changing the schedule, changing the vacation calendar, agreeing on something or disagreeing on something. It's a very good way for both parents to go back and refresh their memory about what happened if there's a disagreement later. So it's a nice record because people's memories fade and their impressions of what happened sometimes change based on their emotional state. So for that reason too, it's very nice. It helps clarify exactly what happened.
Yeah, sounds like a great tool. You have on here duplicate sets of stuff. Kind of talked about the clothing already, but...
Yes. If any of us could imagine going to work and bringing everything we needed for the next day with us, that's difficult. And for children to have to be lugging things to school, sports equipment, cleats, things like that, it's a chore. So if we can have two sets, or the parents can arrange to transfer the items without burdening the child. The children didn't ask for this divorce. I think we owe it to them to make it as easy as possible for them to transition from home to home.
We're talking with Dr. Lori Love. Her website is lovealvarez.com. That's the website, lovealvarez.com. The last one you have here on your list is communicate, which I would have to assume was one of the hardest, probably one of the reasons they're in this situation to begin with. But that's still important, huh?
It really is. To know what's going on in the other home, to communicate about a child struggling, things they might have said, really important to be able to share. And if you can't do it face-to-face or by phone, you can do it by Family Wizard, by saying, Johnny had a lot of nightmares last night. Just simple things that if you were married, you would share with your spouse if you were going out of town the next night.
Right. Got it. You've been in this business for a while, right? You've got some tricks of the trade that maybe there's some things that everybody should be doing?
Well, there's certainly a lot of things that everybody should be doing, and I have compassion for people in this situation because sometimes we're not at our best. And I think if your heart is in the right place and you do a little bit of research, you can make your child's life easier in this kind of a situation. I try to take parents out of the place they're in, which is perhaps I'm betrayed, I'm abandoned, I'm financially frightened, and look forward. And so one of the tools that I use is I ask, if you could do one thing and you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do? And it's a pretty profound question because people start saying, well, I'd buy lottery tickets so my children and my great-grandchildren, would never have to worry about money.
Okay.
I would come up with a way to solve the world peace issue, and then my child would not have to worry about war and that sort of a thing. But it helps them to think about things other than just the microcosm of what's happening right now, but the bigger picture and what they want for their children.
Well, and Lori, you're seeing people that obviously have made a decision to see you. And so that's a big step in itself, is to realize that I need help with the child issues and I want to involve a professional. What about the people maybe that are watching that haven't made that decision to involve you, and some of the things they can do to just make it easier on their kid or their kids if they decide not to use a professional, which I'm guessing that most situations could use a professional of some sort at some level, but if they're trying to do it by themselves, what are some tips you can give them that?
Well, fortunately, divorce is not a strange thing anymore. It's very common, and it's happening in probably more than 50% of the families at this point. So our self-help sections, when we go to look at books, are full of resources. One of my favorites, I would say, is by Connie Aarons, and it's We're Still Family, and it really talks about the positive divorce. She also has The Good Divorce, and that's a book that tells people how to make this a positive process, how not to get stuck in the traps, how not to get stuck in despair, to take care of yourself. Make sure, it's that old adage on the airplane, put the air mask on yourself first and then put it on your child. Super important, because if you're not doing okay, I guarantee your child's not going to be doing okay.
It's true.
That's good advice. Dr. Lori Love, she's a child custody consultant. Her website is lovealvarez.com. That's the website, lovealvarez.com. Now, Allison, you're a family law mediator and attorney, but really want to talk about some of the unique situations you're able to put in place when the separation is done through mediation as compared through a litigation situation.
Well, one of the reasons I do primarily mediation now is I feel like we have a much bigger toolbox to work with. And so, for example, when people choose mediation, just that decision alone is putting kids first, because you are essentially, you're coming into the room and you're saying, we want to work this out ourselves. We don't want to have a judge or some strangers make a decision for our children, and we want to learn how to communicate. So those factors alone are a huge step in the right direction. And in terms of the actual issues that the kids, that are relevant to the kids, I mean, as you can imagine, think about your own children and the kinds of decisions as a couple that you have to make every single day through the years. things about when each of you is going to spend time with them,
Right.
their extracurricular activities, what schools they're going to go to, who are their doctors going to be, what's their medical care, as simple as, are they going to have tutors? Are they struggling? Are they having teacher issues? Are they having social issues? Do they need therapy? Do they need a tutor? I mean, these are all the kinds of things that we talk about in mediation. The families actually come in, or the parents come in, and we have incredibly detailed conversations, things that a court would never get involved in because they really just don't have the time. It's not designed to address these things. And often there's also those issues that are keeping people from being comfortable or keeping a couple comfortable with maybe the other person having more time. Concerns one parent might have that the other parent is not going to be able to meet the child's needs in certain ways. And we also talk about those issues. It's sort of taking the elephant in the room and putting it on the table and discussing it. And often if the parents can air that and address how they're going to tackle what one parent perceives as, you're out of touch with the kids and that's why I don't want you to have more time, we can get over that hurdle if we can come up with some tools to address that, right? And sometimes the parents will, you'd be surprised how open people are in mediation because it is a confidential process and they feel safe there.
We're talking with Allison Patton with Patton Thixon. Her website is AllisonPattonLaw.com. That's AllisonPattonLaw.com. So you have here putting kids first in the parenting plan, which you mentioned a variety of ways that can happen, but also on top of the list here is how the roles may change within the marriage.
Well, what's very typical in divorce is you have, even in this day and age where there's, both parents are working, there's often one parent who has sort of been, quote, the primary with the kids. And we also still have a number of marriages where we have traditional roles with a stay-home spouse and a working spouse. So what ends up happening is everyone comes into divorce, and the sort of the model we often see is the person who's been with the children feels an ownership in the kids, like those are their property, so to speak. The person who's been working often feels an ownership in the income and the assets because that's what that person has created. And what we work toward is what is essentially almost like a paradigm shift of helping them to see that all of that belongs to both of them. And so we have to work through the roles of, okay, you may have had a traditional marriage. At this point, are you going to continue with the parenting that you've been doing traditionally, or are you going to move it to a more shared arrangement in two different homes? And that is, of course, always the main conversation that has to happen in mediation. And I see a variety of outcomes. I see some families or some parents coming in who are saying, we actually want to keep it very similarly because I'm the one who has a job that's very stressful, demanding, I travel a lot. I really am not it's not suitable for me to take 50% custody, and I want the kids to have the stability with the other parent who's doing a great job. And then sometimes I see families who say, this was a great model, but our kids now, it's time for us to gradually move into a shared arrangement because we're at a different phase in our lives. So those are the kinds of things that we talk through in mediation. It's a much more cooperative process than going to court, rolling the dice, speaking to a family court service counselor for 50 minutes, and then having that person make a recommendation, knowing very little about your kids and your family. So.
Right. Talking with Allison Patton. Her website is AllisonPattonLaw.com. That's the website, AllisonPattonLaw.com. Now let's say that we're able to get it perfectly correct through one-shot mediation. Yeah, I want to hear that maybe the kids' needs change over time. So not only are you looking at now, but projecting in the future what they might need, and how do you protect for that?
Well, this is the interesting thing. Most people who start in mediation at the beginning of their divorce stick with mediation throughout their children's lives. It's a very interesting pattern, but if you start in court, you end up getting into the cycle of every time you want to modify and change something, you end up back in court, which is very contentious and very expensive, and very mixed results. A lot of people are not happy with the sort of the rolling of the dice they get going to court. And sometimes I see both parents who went to court and neither of them like the recommendation. What you can do what I see people doing, and since I've been doing this a long time, I have families that have been coming back for years and years.
Sure.
But as the children change and grow and people's lives change, they come back and they talk again and they modify the schedule. It can even be at the beginning of the case, we often put into place what we call step-up plans. So you might have, 4 or 6 months of one kind of arrangement to help the kids transition into divorce. And then we start stepping up the time where they're doing more of a shared arrangement between the two households. And then, of course, I see people all the time at ages and stages, right? We get situations where now the kids are young teens, and or one parent has to move to a different location, or one parent has a new spouse or partner, and so the arrangement can change. So really and truly, people just keep coming back to mediation as needed, depending on where their kids are. Another interesting thing is I have right now a lot of parents, a large number of parents who have some children with special needs, either toddlers who have autism spectrum and are undergoing extensive therapy, or older kids who have some special needs. And those parents also come back a lot because they have a lot to deal with, and the child changes dramatically every 3-4 years, and they have to readjust, and they have to think about schools and different therapies and different ILPs in the schools, and they come in and they talk about those things. Then we have teen issues, right? Yeah. We have as a parent of teens, we're dealing with a whole variety of things we never dealt with before. We're dealing with, social media. We're dealing with, cars. We're dealing with, driver's licenses, SAT, prep courses, college applications, all the social issues that go with teens. We're dealing with a lot of sports. We're dealing with trips to go visit colleges. I mean, there's so much as parents that at every stage of a child's life, it's a different set of needs, right? And what I love about mediation, and the reason I really don't do litigation anymore, is that we set a framework at the beginning of the case of these parents learning how to communicate. And once they get those tools in place and they start succeeding at that, it sort of paves the way that, yes, you're going to hit bumps in the road, like married parents, right? But you build on success, and then you keep coming back and you learn how to work through those issues. So it's not easy. It's not Mary Poppins, but it is very doable. And I also see parents that come into mediation and even decide we're stuck on this issue, so we're going to go see somebody like Lori and have that person help us. So they end up using all the tools available outside of the court system, mediation and therapy, to make decisions that are really putting the kids first.
We're talking with Allison Patton. She is a family law mediator and attorney. Her website is AllisonPattonLaw.com. AllisonPattonLaw.com. Now you have on here, should parents feel more or less worried about losing their parental rights through the mediation process versus litigation?
Well, that's a really common question, because I have a lot of people who start mediation by saying, I'm very concerned that if I do what's right for my kids right now, I'm going to be screwing myself forever, and I'll never be able to get the shared custody arrangement I want. So they will say in mediation, I really don't think right now it's a good idea for us to jump to a 50-50 share. But if I don't fight for it, my lawyer's telling me if I don't fight for it right now, I'm never going to get it. So we do address that in mediation, and we work to write agreements that make it clear that either we come up with step-up patterns that we can memorialize to protect the party who is sort of taking less time now but wants more time later. We can also write all kinds of language that help create a framework of how they're going to proceed to that point, so that they're not locked into something. And of course we have their attorneys review this and jump on board with it and help advise, so that they also are getting good counsel outside of mediation. The court system is so much more all or nothing, right? People feel if I don't go and assert my rights right now, I'm going to lose. And when people come into mediation, they just sort of relax a little, and it just enables them to start actually thinking about what's best for my kids, not just coming from a place of fear or a place of revenge or feeling like they have to win. It's just a very different dynamic. Having done litigation and mediation, I can say it's an entirely different dynamic. One more thing that's interesting, if we have another minute, is we also talk about things in mediation that that I think are, like I think Lori would agree, are fundamentally very important to children, but not addressed by the court system. Things about, can one parent go and see the child's room at the other parent's house, which is very important to kids. They want to feel like their parents know where they are. Things like, when we're setting up two households, how can we get another set of furniture for the kids that makes them feel like it's a true home? How do we share things like toys and books? How do we deal with parents coming to sports events or school events together? Parents actually come up with a plan. We're going to sit together, or we're not going to sit together because that's going to be too tense. The parents actually formulate things such as, we're going to always do drop-offs and pick-ups at school because we're just too uncomfortable around each other right now, and the kids pick up on that tension. That's the interesting thing, is that when you give parents the freedom to really focus on their kids and not be coming from a place of anxiety, fear, they are very creative and very successful in addressing their kids' needs most of the time. Now, sometimes you get somebody who's a little clueless, but we work on those people by giving them education, helping them get some professional help. And, again, the whole goal is for this family to continue to thrive as a family still, even though they're living in separate households.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. We've been talking with Allison Patton. She is a family law mediator and attorney. Her website is AllisonPattonLaw.com. AllisonPattonLaw.com. And we've also heard from Dr. Lori Love. She is a child custody consultant. Her website is lovealvarez.com. That's the website, lovealvarez.com. Ladies, I want to thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
It was great information. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Ryan, what's happening in Solana Beach lately?
So want to take just a brief minute to talk about one of the new developments going on there. And there are very few new developments in Solana Beach. Solana Beach is very small. It is a mixed-use residential and commercial development going on that they're planning right around the One and Dahlia. But more so, there's a meet and greet or a planned outreach set to happen October 24th at the Loma Santa Fe Country Club from 5:30 to 6:30. We want to invite the community to come on out and hear about the proposal and hear asking questions that they might have, and we'll get answers to I guess one of the newest, pretty unique developments going on in the area.
What kind of development? Is it residential or is
Residential commercial.
residential
Mixed use,
commercial?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Interesting. Great. Well, I am a new Solana Beach resident, as is our next guest, Dave Schulman, who is a family law attorney with Moore, Schulman and Moore. Their website is msnfamilylaw.com, msmfamilylaw.com. Welcome, Dave. So we've been talking with Allison and Lori about kind of working with kids, putting kids first, and going through mediation, trying to work together to make it a better situation for kids. But that doesn't always end up with good results, isn't always successful. And so sometimes things continue to go badly for children, and the court system gets involved, right? And the court system appoints someone like you to come in and help with the situation. Tell us a little bit about the situations that you get brought in on.
Well, that's correct. I'm an attorney. I'm appointed by the court to represent the children or child. The court appoints the attorney, so the parents don't have a choice. The court will set the payment. Either the parents will pay or the county will pay, depending on what the issue is. And I get appointed for a number of reasons. Anything from if parents want to move and they want the child's preference on any issue, to there's some counseling going on and we need a new counselor, what school should be chosen, all the way to I want my child to testify about the violence that happened in the home and this child needs an attorney. Or the one I get a lot lately is I want my 14-year-old to testify and talk about how he or she wants to live with mom or wants to live with dad, and I want that child to go on the stand and tell the court that.
So are 14-year-old kids allowed to testify? Does that actually happen?
Yes, since 2011, in the family court, there is what I call a presumption that children's voices, 14 and older, need to be heard. How that's heard is something I'll call it a little debate. Some judges like to have children testify. Some judges don't want children to testify.
And when children testify, is it the same kind of format that when I testify, that I'm put on direct and there's cross-examination? I'm hoping that it isn't as severe as what I have to put up with sometimes.
It can be. It can be. Usually, if I represent the child, it's exactly what I don't want. I'll try and get the lawyers or the judges together and see if we can formulate a way that the child's voice can be heard. A lot of times, what I usually do is I pick a good therapist, because as the child's attorney, I hold the privilege. So I want that child to have a good therapist and to give me information. I'm an attorney, not a therapist. So I'll have somebody like Dr. Love or somebody else be the therapist for that child to get me the information. Sometimes I'll pick or ask that what we call a neutral evaluator be heard, that they can speak to the child and we can get the child's voice in that way. There are a number of things we can do.
So it doesn't have to be a matter of actually putting them on the stand. It can be a lot of behind the scenes, with the judge or with you, or
well, it's not
hopefully
behind the scenes. You can't just go. A lot of parents think that their child's going to sit with the judge and just tell them everything they want that child to hear, or that the judge should hear based on that child's preference, and that's not what happens a lot of times. I will also tell you that there are a lot of children that come to me and they're like, I want to testify. I'm like, okay, you can testify, and we'll go through how they get to testify. And 16-year-old children don't like cross-examination. No, they don't. So. They don't like the fact that they have to answer a question directly and they can't expand on that, and somebody's going to ask them other questions. So a lot of times they change their mind.
We're talking with Dave Schulman, who is a family law attorney, a court-appointed child advocate, I would call it, right?
Sure.
And he is with Moore, Schulman & Moore, who their website is msmfamilylaw.com. So Dave, what other types of things do you help them with? I know there's a lot of issues that come up with, driver's licenses and social media. And do you actually get involved in rule making, rule breaking, and what parents want them to do?
Well, I don't get involved in rule breaking, and I have my own children who break their own rules, so I'd be the worst person to do that. But I do ask the court to set boundaries on things. One of the issues that comes up is parents love to put pictures of their children on social media. That's a thing that happens a lot. What do you do if one parent doesn't want that, or dad's girlfriend puts the child on social media, or mom's boyfriend puts the child on social media? I will tell you what I try and do a lot is tell the parents to go see somebody like Allison, to get somebody to what I call balls and strikes, so they can get an idea before they go to court. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. But that's one of the things I try and do. I get them to sometimes talk to the therapist, who will say, that's probably not an appropriate thing to do, or here are some boundaries that we need to set. Mom, your boyfriend doesn't need to be putting pictures on his, Instagram page of you and the child and everybody else, showing what a good family you are. But that's the nature of what's going on today.
Right. So tell us a couple of examples of cases that you've been involved in and some of the things you've actually been able to help them with.
Well, when you say help them with, I think the biggest thing is trying to get them into some type of setting where the parents can really work among themselves and figure out what they're doing so they don't need me. Mm-hmm. There's some issues that if mom is in the military and gets orders to move to Virginia and dad lives in San Diego, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. But if mom wants to move with new boyfriend to Riverside County and take the children in the middle of the school year, that's kind of an issue that we deal with, and you kind of want to put them in the right direction before you spend 3 or 4 days in a trial telling them, look, this is probably what's going to happen. Here's basically kind of how the court looks at these things. You have a 14-year-old child. Think about your 14-year-old child. Do you want to yank your 14-year-old child out of middle school and put them in a new middle school where they don't know anybody? Those, some of the things that I try and help with. Yes. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't.
Yes. Well, I think all of us professionals here can agree with you that happens a fair amount. So having the unique perspective that you have of dealing with families when kind of things go wrong or don't go as smoothly as they should, you probably have some pointers that you can give people on things that they can do differently or better when they're going through this that you've seen.
Well, I always say go get a therapist for your child so your child has an outlet. You are not your child's outlet. Examining your child and videoing your child and telling, the other parent, this is what the child wants, that's not going to work. Go get somebody neutral who will give you an opinion, who's neutral, who has no beef with you, no beef with mom, that is there solely for the child. Go see a mediator like Allison. See if you can work stuff out before you go to court and involve the child. And sometimes maybe give Allison the right to speak to the therapist, so the therapist can get some idea of what's going on in mediation and kind of what they're thinking. To me, if you go to court, it should be a last resort. But a lot of people don't listen because one, as Dr. Love said, one parent is either really upset and can't see the forest through the trees, or sometimes we deal with mental illness. I have a parent that's severely bipolar, and there's not much we can do about it. It's very hard, and that parent works on the child, and to the detriment of the children. But it occurs, and there's not much we can do about that.
I think one of the things that you just said that is very true, because I work in this field also with people going through divorces, is the team approach. And I think we're very fortunate in San Diego to have professionals that are financial, that are litigators, that are mediators, that are psychologists and realtors. Ryan actually helps a lot of our clients find new homes. But that we all kind of communicate, of course, with their permission, but to try and work together to help them move along, whether it's in litigation or not. It could be in litigation too. I do a fair amount, as does Dave's firm, where there's cases that are litigating, but we still work together. We still try and make it easier on them and still try and resolve issues that we can resolve, right? And so it's that teamwork approach and knowing that that they need to ask for help, and once they ask for help, then you can refer them to others. I can refer them to others, and suddenly you have 2 or 3 people that are actually there for the best interests of the kids, which is in the best interest of the family, right?
Oh yeah, I always try to put together a team of people. I'm an attorney, so I'm not going to. I know enough to know what I don't know, and I want an expert opinion on therapy. If it's educational, I'll find an educational specialist. I represent 3 kids, and one of them had some special needs with education, so I got an educational therapist, and we had to do an assessment of the child, and there are a number of things that we can do. But yes, I like to put together as many people as possible.
Yes. And if your kids listening to this, hopefully if there's teenagers or families that are contemplating it, ask for help, because any one of the people that have been on today can help and can refer you to the right people. And if we're not the right person, we can get you to the right person, because I keep saying that there's no situation that we haven't seen before, but then every now and then I still get a new one.
I get situations I haven't seen before all the time. All sorts of stuff crops up now.
So one last thing, Dave, anything else that you can give parents in terms of, I know you've already said, get help, ask for help, ask for professionals. Once they're kind of embroiled in the litigation system and they haven't maybe made the decision early on to do the mediation and do the counsel, can they still opt into that even though it's late in the game?
Yeah, you can opt into mediation anytime. Sometimes sit amongst yourselves and see what you can agree with. I mean, if you can't sit in the same room together, go sit down with a mediator, somebody neutral in the same room, and get some opinion before you end up going to court and spending money, and because your lawyers have to advocate and they have to do things the court mandates them to do. So if you can come to an agreement, you're much better off. And remember that children are children. They don't think like adults. There's a reason they can't vote. There's a reason that they can't drink until they're 21. So understand that when you're talking to them and they make complaints, that they're making complaints as children. And so don't analyze that as an adult. Analyze that, understand it's coming from a child. And it may not be absolutely logical, but understand that and then find somebody who can work with the child and help you understand how to deal with it.
Great.
Dave, thanks for doing what you do. It sounds like a tough job. Dave Schulman, more, his website is msmfamilylaw.com. That's the website, msmfamilylaw.com. I want to say thank you to our other guests as well, Allison and Dr. Lori. Thank you for being with us, and until next week.